Pardon? We are live. We can call the meeting of the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules to order and start our first meeting in over a month. Hope everyone is well. We will go around the room and introduce ourselves.
Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. I just held that.
I don't know where I'm spacing.
Where the camera is in the setup.
Christopher Bray, live in Bristol, represent Addison Center.
And Representative Mark Higley from Lowell, and I represent Lowell, Jay, Eden, Westfield, and Troy.
Representative Carol Lodi from Burlington.
State Senator Joe Benning from the Caledonia District.
Representative Seth Baumgartz. I represent Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and part of Sunderland.
Representative Trevor Squirrel representing Underhill and Jericho.
Senator Mark McDonald representing most of Orange County, and on the screen,
Senator Jenny Lyons representing Chittenden County.
thank you. And the first item on the agenda would be to review and approve the minutes of May 19th.
So moved.
Senator Bray has moved that the minutes be approved. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. And the minutes have been approved. First item on the agenda he says knowingly without being able to put his hands on it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I believe that it is 22E11. The
Department of Health and Vital Records, emergency rule.
Yeah,
And Natalie Wheel, Public Health Policy Advisor, Department of Health, is our witness this morning on 22E11. You were on the screen. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Natalie Weil. Thank you for having me here today. I'm a policy advisor with the Vermont Department of Health. With this filing, the department is proposing the Vital Records Emergency Rule. The purpose of this rule is to establish specific requirements for obtaining, creating, amending, and storing birth and death certificates in Vermont. Act 88 of 2022 allows the department to adopt emergency rules for the purposes of implementing a process for an individual to amend the gender marker on their birth certificate, including an option for a non-binary gender marker. With this rulemaking, the department is proposing to adopt that process through defining the term non-binary to reflect additional gender markers that may be reflected on a birth certificate. This rulemaking also proposes to create a process for individuals to file the affidavit of gender identity with the department. In drafting this rule, the department worked with the LGBTQIA Alliance of Vermont, who have reviewed and support this rule. The department is also in the last stages through the formal rulemaking process to adopt the Vital Records rule. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Does the committee have any questions? Representative Higley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question, and it's on the definition that you folks came up with, non-binary. So I'm looking at the definition 3.12. It has a list of 3 definitions specifically under non-binary. And then it says, or otherwise unspecified by the person. My first question is shouldn't that be or otherwise specified by the person? And if that's the case, my second question is why have those other 13 definitions if it can be specified by the person?
Thank you for your question. It's a good one. The reason why the department opted to go this route was because this is a growing vocabulary, and we didn't want to choose a gender identity. We didn't want to make it an exhaustive list in case that other gender identities that were unspecified was the gender identity that somebody identifies as.
So again, though, shouldn't that last provision in there be or otherwise specified by the person? It doesn't make any sense to me that it says or otherwise unspecified by the person.
That is a great point. I will get back to you on that. Thank you.
Okay, and again, I just don't understand, this extensive list, yet if an individual specifies what they want to be considered as, it's a go. And I just, it's a little confusing to me that why shouldn't it be unending then, I guess, if it's can be specified by the person, just kind of confusing. But I would think at least that last part should be or otherwise specified by the person, not unspecified. Thank you.
Any further questions of the witness? I had a question to counsel. The updating of the information requires a payment of a fee, I believe. And my question is this simply the same fee that others who are updating information would be paying for other updates? Ms. Wheel, could you enlighten us on this, and then council is double checking the language.
Thank you. There is no fee associated with updating your gender marker on your birth certificate.
Okay. I saw a mention of fee somewhere there, and this change in the rule does not add any new fee or?
It does not, Mr.
Does
Chair.
not. Thank you. That was simple. Did I hear a motion? Senator Bray.
Mr. Chair, if there's no further discussion, I would move approval of Rule 22E11, Department of Health Vital Records Emergency Rule.
Senator Bray has moved that the rule be approved. Representative Bong.
Just going to a question raised by Representative Higley about unspecified versus specified. Can that be corrected after the fact, or?
So this is an emergency rule. So it is, I believe it was effective on July 1 of 2022 is the date that they specified. They're in the process of doing their permanent rulemaking, and there would certainly be time for them to make that change in the permanent rule. I also think under your approval authority, if it is determined that this was a technical or typographic issue, it could probably be corrected under that as well. But you are in a position where you're going to see the permanent rule again. So there is that sort of natural follow-up on it.
So Ms. Wheel, you've taken note of that question, and the permanent, we will expect, should this be approved, the permanent rule is likely to address that question. believe we got a nod there.
Yes.
Is there, any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. And the rule has been approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Brings us to the next rule on the schedule, the Vermont Public Utility Commission, PUC, emergency rule having to do with emergency disconnections. This is it says emergency disconnection, but this is or is not an emergency rule.
This is an emergency rule.
Okay.
It's got an E.
We have had a series of emergency rules whose time has expired, and we will listen to the testimony from Steph Hoffman, who will tell us whether this is another one of such rules or if there are any changes in this emergency rule compared to the one that's about to expire. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee. Good morning. My name is Steph Hoffman. I'm Deputy General Counsel for the Public Utility Commission. And as the chair has noted, this is the same emergency disconnection rule approved by LCAR last January with 2 areas of change and clarification based on where we're at with the federal funding programs that are aimed at helping Vermonters who are utility customers suffering from financial hardship due to the pandemic. As the committee may recall, this rule has been in place since near the beginning of the pandemic. There have been multiple iterations in response to the pandemic and various junctures that require changes to our disconnection procedures. And due to the persistent economic consequences of the pandemic, this emergency rule has helped provide consumer notification of various financial aid programs that distribute federal funds and some enhanced consumer protections to customers who have been experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19. The 2 changes that I'll highlight for the committee, one was embedded in the version of this emergency rule that went into effect on July 1. And that is the addition of a paragraph that requires utilities to file updated disconnection notices with the commission at the expiration of this rule. We aren't positive at this point that the rule will expire in 6 months, and that will be the end of our need for these protections. But in the event that it is the appropriate time to transition away from the emergency rule, we will need the utilities to file updated disconnection notice forms that would be in place from that point forward and apply to disconnections under the normal rule. The second area is contained in the revised version of the rule that was submitted to LCAR this past Monday. And based on comments from the Department of Public Service, we have proposed a few minor clarifying changes to section 2.602 to clarify when a utility may disconnect. And those changes make clear that first, a utility may not disconnect while an applicant to one of the financial assistance programs waits for an appeal determination. And the second is to provide clarification that if all other requirements for disconnection are met, the utility may disconnect after a customer exhausts all funding from one of the programs they were accepted into. And so those 2 circumstances haven't been, the second one hasn't occurred up until this point in the rule process, but the first one is sort of a newer issue that has arisen and was brought to our attention by the department after the filing of this emergency rule took place. So all changes in regard to both of those issues are reflected in the red line versions of the rules you receive with your materials. And so our request to LCAR is that you issue a memo supporting the amended version of the emergency rule that includes the clarifications of the periods of eligibility for protection from disconnection that I just discussed as a result of those comments. We haven't received any other comments on this rule and have posted it and created a rule proceeding as we have with all other iterations of the rule. So I'll just now stand open for any questions from the committee. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the witness? Representative Higley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a couple of questions. I guess the first is the best place for folks to reach out to see if they qualify or not is the Vermont Homeowners Assistance Program. Is that correct?
So the Vermont Housing Authority actually hosts the application for that program, but there are also other contacts at the state, one of which, in addition to the Vermont Housing Authority, is provided on the disconnection notice forms and on the bills, which is the Consumer Protection Division of the Vermont Department of Public Service as well. They can help connect folks to appropriate programming.
Okay, thank you. But even if somebody got a hold of the Vermont Homeowners Assistance Program, they would steer them in the right direction, correct?
Yes, if, for example, they are not a homeowner and instead are a renter, they would be steered toward the VRAP program, the Renters Assistance Program.
Great. And then I guess just one other question is, do we have any idea how much money is left for the program?
My understanding, we don't administer the funding for the program, but my understanding from our last contact with the Department of Public Service, which has a little bit greater insight into that, is that there are still funds left, and there's an estimate that based on enrollment pacing, it's hard to tell because pacing has changed a lot in the last year and a half, but that based on pacing, there is an estimate that there'll be an expiration of probably both of these programs by the end of this year, if not early to mid spring of next year. But the Renters Assistance Program is a time-based program. Once you're accepted, you're in for 18 months, and there's an understanding that there are folks that are still going to be able to apply to that program. So there is a substantial amount of funding still left to allow new enrollment in that process. But the Homeowners Assistance Program, the vast majority of the assistance, my understanding, goes toward housing costs, and the utilities component is a smaller element.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions for the witness? If not, what's the committee's pleasure? Senator Bray.
Hearing no further questions, I would move approval of Rule 22E12, Vermont Public Utility Commission, Emergency Rule 2600, COVID-19 Emergency Disconnection, as further amended through correspondence with the department. And I'm getting a cue. Wait.
You're almost there. It's the Public Utility Commission. From the Public Utility Commission.
From the Public Utility Commission.
And I would say dated July 22nd, 2022.
As further fleshed out by our council.
Senator Bray has moved that the rule be approved with the amendments set forth and sent to us and noted by council. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay, and the rule has been approved.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Which brings us to 22P07, the Agency of Natural Resources Rules and Regulations, Visitor Conduct and Fees and Charges for State Park Services and Commercial Activities on Department Lands. Speaking for the Rule Director of State Parks, Forest, Parks and Recreation, Nate McKean. Mr. McKean, the floor is yours, and it's a beautiful park behind you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good to see everybody. I'm here with Rochelle Skinner, the Park Sales and Service Manager, and we're here on behalf of our periodic update of the rules and prices that govern the operation of Vermont State Parks. And the fees that we bring in through the park system, through visitor fees, makes up close to 70% of our operating budget. So it's a big part of our operation and what we do. There's quite a few of them. This is my first time in front of this committee presenting the rule changes. And I'm happy to run through some of the changes or open it up to questions if you're familiar with what we're proposing. We've had quite a robust public involvement process. We've reached over 1 million folks through social media and our newsletter, and we did receive 100 comments back, which I believe is in the filing. So we were really pleased with that engagement from those 100 folks. And some of the comments that came back were in favor, some were opposed, and for some of them there was just a misunderstanding in what we were proposing. So we were able to, on the spot, respond. Rochelle did a lot of this and clear up any misunderstanding. I'll just say the fee increase is minimal for Vermonters. It's a $1 fee for camping. There's a bigger fee increase for out-of-staters. Generally, it's a $7 per night increase. And then there's a $1 day use increase for adult day use. Our pass program is staying the same, and the fee for children is staying the same.
Any questions for the witness?
Mr. Chair, again, I have one specific question, and that's in the summary, it talks about for the Green Mountain Reservoir, removing the unique camping reservation structure. What does that mean? What happened?
That means that that's going to fall under the same fee structure that we have for all of our other campsites, camping parks. And it's a way for us to be a little more consistent and uniform, and also to keep things as simple as possible, which we've learned is very important for our visitors and the 450 seasonal staff and volunteers that we have out there operating the parks. So that's just a kind of a rural cleanup type thing. Green River Reservoir is a special place, and it had a special fee structure for a while, particularly as we began to charge fees there and got our sea legs underneath us to operate that park. But now the park's in great shape. It's very popular, and we feel it just warrants a similar fee structure as the rest of our campgrounds.
Thank you for that. Just as a comment, I hope it continues to be a great park up there and continues to be a Green Mountain Reservoir. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Representative Bodie.
I'd just like to make an observation. On page 2 of the economic impact analysis, I read the purpose of the state park increases is to help offset the continued increase in costs to operate and maintain the park system. And that the alternative is to increase the state park camping prices, to increasing them, is to rely more on the general fund for the additional $1.5 million per year to support the operation and maintenance of Vermont's 55 state parks. So these will bring in $1.5 million. It's in the rulemaking explanation of economic impact. It also says it's not practical to reduce costs, some costs for such items as staffing must increase given the challenging labor market. And further on page 2 of the economic analysis, it says the proposed rule change will have a positive impact on recreation. These price increases will prevent parks from having to cut recreation services. So I'm heartened by this responsible request. It's justifiable, it's responsible, and fortunately for Vermonters, should the General Assembly so decide, it's potentially replicable with a fee bill. We have not had a fee bill for 6 years. And I'm, again, heartened by this sound request of the administration to increase fees by $1.5 million.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the witness?
Senator Lyons.
Senator Lyons.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand that I am on Zoom and therefore not really integral to the meeting, but I don't want to ignore the comments that we received from both chairs of Ways and Means and Senate Finance, House Ways and Means and Senate Finance with concerns regarding when fees are raised and the governor's insistence that no fees shall be increased during his tenure. So I understand also that the witness is probably not the person who can answer the question about the motivation and the rationale for increasing the fees, given that sort of that political environment. But if there is any light that can be shed on that, that'd be great. And I am concerned that we will begin to see fees proposed to LCAR that are idiosyncratic. I mean, in other words, that they're going to come in one at a time, and the balance of revenue to the state will not be overseen by the committees of jurisdiction. So it's a concern. If Mr. McKeon can comment, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, and we've been training ourselves to call these prices. It's just sort of a price for the service that you're receiving, and I think a lot of the fees, when you talk about the fee bill, we like to think that we're it doesn't quite fit in that category. But I will say that you're right. I can't speak a lot on this, but our first step when we do propose some rule changes is to run it up the chain through the administration. And in this case, it's been a while since we proposed any new rule changes. And when we do, we try to wrap as much in as we can because it's a long process and it takes quite a bit of work. So we don't by any means incrementally add fee increases every single year. Sometimes it's a big gap in between. Yes, go ahead.
Well, so at what point during the rulemaking process were the fees added in? So was it 18 months ago?
Rochelle, do you remember when we first started the process? Are you on mute still?
I don't think it was 18 months ago. It was probably closer to a year ago.
So in fact, and this is not your responsibility necessarily, but in fact, there would have been time for the committees of jurisdiction to have reviewed the fee request that is here before us, because we've heard from our two committee chairs that this wasn't a part of their decision making. So it's a concern. I think that we as members of LCAR, I'll speak for myself, it's a concern that I have that when we see rules, we would like to know that committees of jurisdiction have had an opportunity to review the request. And having said all of that, I do think the work that you guys are doing on parks and recreation in our state is really outstanding, important, and critical, all the rest of the things that others have said. But in terms of once we ignore the procedure one place, it becomes a little bit easier to ignore other places.
Senator Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on behalf of Senate Natural Resources and Energy, at any rate, to speak to Senator Lyons' point, I did review the rules and then the revised rules that came out and signed off that they met legislative intent. We didn't have any conversation in committee over the year, but I wouldn't necessarily have expected it to hear about a pending price increase. Mr. McKeon, is it correct that the last price increase was 2019?
That is, Rochelle, maybe you can confirm that, but it depends on which fee or which price we're talking about. But in general, I think the last time we came before the committee was in 2019.
Yes, that's correct. It was 2019.
So thank you. I think I have a question for our council, and I see Mr. O'Grady is on the call. And just for the question that's coming up about fees, whether there's any sort of ad hoc nature to this versus going through the fee bill, I'm wondering if our council could clarify the legal landscape. Because as I understand it, your fee setting or price setting is somewhat unique compared that it's separated out from what's gathered up into the fee bill, but I don't know how that works. And I'm not sure if someone can describe from our legal side what the requirements on the administration are in terms of presenting a fee bill.
So, thank you, Senator Bray, because the question that you ask is what everyone on this committee has been asking. And when I saw the beautiful picture behind you, I was looking carefully to see if there was anyone walking on water on the lake behind you, because the fact that your department has proposed a fee increase, which I think council will tell us is legal, is the equivalent of walking on water, because no other fees that we have seen in any department throughout state government, which are routinely updated by going through the legislature, your department appears not to have to do that. And for the public who's listening, we in the legislature, this is a concern of whether the policy of increasing fees in statute should be done without it going through the legislature. So this is no reflection on your department and its work, but it is distressing, as Representative Odie pointed out earlier, that as expenses go up, those people who ordinarily would be paying larger fees do not pay them, and it falls on others in the state to make those payments. So that seems to be the issue that is being discussed here. Senator Bray had a question for our council, and council, would you share with us why this department maybe appears to walk on water, but apparently doesn't have to?
Certainly, and then Mike is here and he can chime in with anything additional. So I think your question is sort of two pieces. One is why is this happening in this capacity now? And then what is the ordinary course? So under 32 VSA section 603, it says that any new fee shall be established solely by act of the General Assembly. The rate or amount of or adjustment to any fee shall be set by act of the General Assembly. And then it continues on from there. That section 603, is not withstood. So remember, that's when we say, we ignore this law that says X, Y, Z, and we're going to do something different. Is not withstood in 10 BSA section 2603C, which says that the reasonable fees or charges for the use of the lands, roads, camping sites, buildings, and other facilities can be set through rulemaking done by the Commissioner of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, which is what you're seeing here. So in this situation, there is statutory language that says, do not follow that ordinary course where it is the General Assembly that sets fees. If you think back, and I included this as an example in my summary email, to when you had all of those cannabis control board rules, there was like a series of meetings where we had a different one each week, and I think there were 5 in total, and it covered so much of the regulatory scheme. But then there was this cannabis control board fee bill that set all of the different licensing fees. And that's like the ordinary course, and you saw that because they were new fees. It wasn't adjusting fees that exist. There hasn't been a fee bill in a while. Under another part of 32 VSA Chapter 7, which covers public monies, Section 605, that's where it addresses the requirements that there be a fee bill, a fee report from the administration, and then it goes in that 3-year cycle. That hasn't been happening, and I can't speak to the why behind that. But this is, in its unique nature of the statutory delegation, why you're seeing them here, why you don't typically see fees in other rules, and then the ordinary person. I can give you more information on the latter piece. It's a little bit out of the scope of this conversation.
So thank you. I mean, I wasn't questioning that this was inappropriate anyway, having read through the most materials. I think it's related question is to what degree is the regular presentation of a fee bill, statutory requirement, or just process laid out if any administration so chooses to implement a fee change?
So I'm going to be a little bit more off the cuff here because I didn't prepare as much for this question, but section 605, subsection A, the governor shall, no later than the third Tuesday of every annual legislative session, submit a consolidated executive branch fee report and request to the General Assembly, which shall accompany the governor's annual budget report, and requests submitted to the General Assembly as required by section 306 of this title. And then it goes on to have an except for the original one. The content of each annual report and request for fees concerning state agency public records, that's separate. And then it says what the fee report needs to include, and it sets out the 3-year cycle for starting in 2011, 2012, and 2013. And then it says in subsection D what is required if there is a fee request to create a new fee or set or adjust an existing fee. So it seems like it is required, and I will follow up with you on this unless Mike can correct me for being wrong here. It is required that there be the report, but it is not required that there be the fee request. But when there is the fee request, it delineates what needs to be included.
Thank you. I didn't, mean to put you on the spot with.
Okay, should have prepared for this question.
Something peripheral to the rule itself, but I think just to dot the last I, I'm wondering if we've been receiving those reports, even if they have not requested additional funding, annual reports.
So I know that at least once during the Governor Scott administration, their fee report was submitted, but it did not request fees. So there was at least one report submitted with no request for additional or increased fees. I will also note that the fee report is not the only way that a fee can be assessed. I think you've all been on committees where you've created programs that have fees, and then you assess the fee in that bill, and that bill then subsequently goes through your Ways and Means and Finance committees. But what you've done, and it's been in place for a long time, I think over 30 years, in 10 VSA 2603, it says the department doesn't need to go through the legislature for setting its fees, that it can do it through rulemaking. So I can check and see if they have submitted an annual fee report. I know they did submit at least one that did not have a fee request in it.
So thank you. And again, I don't want to take everyone's time on it. Just trying to understand the legal landscape more clearly for everyone. So, thank you.
So thank you for the explanation. And we on this committee, I don't want to say we're straying, to take a look at something that is absent as opposed to something that has been put before us. When the law changed to have all fees go through the legislature, the administration at that time had raised fees, as I recall, for fish and wildlife permits, and they had had the public hearing between Christmas and New Year's. And the next legislature showed up and took its oath, and the first thing it got was a hullabaloo on how come these fees had gone up, and it was that is what generated the law, as someone said, about 30 years ago. So the discussion today on the report that should come to the legislature every year, and that Mr. O'Grady has said he sure came 3 years ago and is going to check on the 2 most recent years. But there have been no fee increases. And when the policy or the practice changes and we go back to dealing with fees on every 3rd year, it'll be a pretty hefty slug to make up for fees that have lagged. And that legislature will be asked to explain why such a thing could possibly have happened. So thank you very much for your testimony, and to the Department of Parks and Recreation. You apparently may continue to walk on water and enjoy it, because apparently you're the only agency, the only department that's able to do that. And that's where we are. Is there any more questions for the witnesses?
I looked up in our.
Council, please
database.
share with us.
It seems like there's been one pretty much every year. I can find 2018, 2019, 21, 22.
Thank you. So the administration has indeed reported that they've reviewed the fees and none have been proposed to be increased for the last 3 years. Is that what you've?
I believe there was a fee bill in 2019.
2019.
It's a small.
Senator Bennett.
Anthea, just out of curiosity, the fee report does not come to LCAR. Is that true?
I mean, it comes to, it is posted on the website. I can send you the link to all of them.
It's not within the jurisdiction of LCAR at all. Okay. I want to let the witness off the hook a little bit. I, at least on institutions, the Committee of Jurisdiction for this particular discussion, was aware that there were upward pressures on the system and that they were talking about the need to have some relief. No formal proposals were made, but I don't think that was their responsibility to us on institutions. But they are statutorily accepted from the entire fee discussion we are now having. I realize there may be political differences about what Phil Scott does or doesn't do with the fees, but I think that's beyond our jurisdiction. Respectfully submitted.
Senator Bray.
So again, I want to restate, I'm not giving the department in any way a hard time. I realize they have this statutory provision and they're following it. And as you know, I signed off on behalf of Senate Natural that it meets legislative intent, turn it into form.
Yep.
So, but it was just to try to understand the context around this particular unique situation.
I'll just add quickly that if Commissioner Snyder was here, he would have had me sit down about 10 minutes ago and taken over because I know he is educated on this. And from my experience, this is the first time I've been through the process leading it. And it's very arduous, comprehensive, and thorough, I feel, with plenty of opportunity for public input. So if I was a Vermonter, I'd feel pretty comfortable there, or a state park user. And you know, we're hosting well over 1 million visitors every year, trying to operate 55 unique sites, and being able to remain as dynamic and flexible as possible with some oversight, of course, is pretty important. Waiting, you know, once every 3 years for a changing in our rules or fees could be could give us even less flexibility.
Thank you. You have once again highlighted why your unique department is not obliged to raise fees the way all the other departments and agencies and motor vehicles and whatever doesn't have to go through that. And because it's unique, it has generated a discussion. Senator Benning is correct when he says that the law is being followed. Perhaps this discussion focuses that there is a special and unique thing taking place in your department that is absent in the other departments and agencies. And I think we've highlighted that, and we cannot solve that or change it. That's up to the General Assembly. But this has been an interesting discussion. Is there any further discussion? Senator Bray.
I don't know if we're ready yet, but I would move approval of Rule 22P07, Agency and Natural Resources Rules and Regulations, Visitor Conduct and Fees and Charges for State Park Services and Commercial Activities on Department lands, with the proposed changes in the correspondence from Ms. Skinner dated July 25, 2022.
Been moved that the rule be approved with the changes noted by Senator and sent to us previously. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Thank you very much for your testimony. That concludes the rules that we have before us. We've had a couple postponements, and perhaps the committee can share with the committee what our intention is for the ones that we had sent to us, but we're not acting upon today.
You have one rule that was originally scheduled for today. It was the VOSHA rule on beryllium, 22P08. That has been postponed until August 25th. You had not received any rules that met the deadline for August 11th, so that would be your next scheduled meeting. And we got the extension approval from VOSHA. And then Damien and I have just been working with VOSHA on some discrepancies between the federal reg and the state rule.
So the rules dealing with VOSHA, there's been a request by the administration to postpone while Vermonters who've learned about that, other witnesses have a chance to look at them and any changes that might be set forth. Okay. Any other new business?
It's likely we will get a new filing then, right? So
You will definitely get it. It won't necessarily have any changes to like the forms or anything, but you can get a clean annotated version and a clean version. An updated clean version.
Senator Bennett.
Channeling Linda Myers, I move we adjourn.
Senator Benning has moved the committee adjourned. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. And we are adjourned.
Thank you for putting up with me, Mr. Chair.
Here. Always a